Yes, the BMW X1 does get bigger grills, but it gets a lot more than that. This is a generational upgrade for the BMW X1. With that, you get completely updated styling, you get refreshed interiors, you get updates to the platform, updates to the engine. This is a comprehensive generational change. Now the question is, should you be picking the X1 over something like a Mercedes-Benz GLA or an Audi Q3? That is exactly what we're going to answer in this video. Before we go ahead though, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the Evo India channel so you don't miss another video drop, and leave a comment down below. Is this a good looking BMW or not? Whenever there's a new BMW in town, we have to talk about styling because BMW has been so radically in your face with their styling of late. But I must say, with the X1, they haven't gone for the same shock and awe effect that they have with something like the X7 or the i7. This is actually pretty palatable. Now the grills, like I said, are bigger, and this is the M Sport variant with the diesel engine, so you get aggressive M Sport bumpers. The headlamps, they are LED headlamps as standard. In fact, as standard, you get adaptive LED headlamps. Over at the side, you'll notice M Sport wheels because again, this is the M Sport variant, an M badge on the flanks. And something that I really like is the fact that the cladding is body colored. It's not black plastic cladding, it is body colored cladding, though you have some gloss black elements at the bottom over there. Another really neat touch is the flush door handles. Now, these sit completely flush with the body. To open the car, you've got to open it like that and shut it like that. Very simple, easy to use, but it lends a really nice, expensive look to the X1. Over at the rear, you've got funky looking tail lights. You've got a nice design element in them over here. And the bumpers again are chunky M Sport bumpers. Now, these bumpers actually remind me a lot of what they did with the M2, those squared off chunky bumpers, but they look a lot better on this car because I think it suits the SUV's appearance better than something like the M2. The diffuser at the bottom, again an M Sport element, and overall the X1 has grown in size, so it's longer, wider, taller than before, and the wheelbase is longer than before. So this is actually bigger compared to the previous X1, and it has that presence about it. And when you see it on the road, you'll say, hey, that looks different, that looks cool. Normally I'd head straight to the driving, but this interior of the BMW X1 has been comprehensively given an update, and I really like it. So let me walk you through the entire thing. First, the steering wheel. This gets the new steering wheel controls, which are similar to what you get on the 7 Series, the i7, but obviously with cheaper plastic. This is also the M Sport steering wheel, so you get a slightly sporty design for this third spoke over here. Paddle shifters behind with a boost function, which I'll explain to you when we're driving the car. Now, the big update here is to this screen. This screen is completely new, a curved screen. Again, similar to what you're getting in a lot of new BMWs. High definition, crisp. It looks almost frameless with thin bezels and almost no frame around it. It looks really, really nice, really expensive. You've got an instrument cluster in front of you, which obviously shows all of your information about your tacho, your fuel, your whatever, the usual stuff. And you've got your infotainment screen over here. Wireless, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. You've also got inbuilt navigation and phone connectivity. You've also got the ability to set up the car from this screen over here. Now, underneath that screen is where things get really interesting. You've got a single air vent in the center and two air vents in front of the co-passenger. So this is a really funky design which I haven't seen before. This is again something that's really cool, this floating center console with all of your controls right here in the armrest. This is actually very similar to what you get on the iX, and honestly, I really like it. I think it's really intuitive. First of all, your controls are right where your arm is. So your start-stop button, your gear selector, the modes button, your volume for your infotainment screen, all of that really accessible exactly where your arm would be. No stretching, feeling, nothing. And it frees up a lot of storage. So you don't get that big gear selector, but what you get is a ton of storage underneath. Really big storage. You can fit a proper 2-liter bottle in there actually, though I don't recommend that. You can fit a number of knickknacks, phones, wallets, keys, change, whatever you want. So much space. You've got cup holders over here, and you've got a wireless phone charger, which again is really interestingly done. It's a vertical phone charger with a little flap to keep your phone in place, and Apparently that's been done so that you can look at your phone in case you get a notification or a call on the go. I don't see why that's necessary since it's always hooked up to CarPlay anyway, but cool touch. Don't look at your phone when you're driving. The materials used in the car are also really nice. So the entire top of the dashboard, soft touch leather. This very nice expensive aluminium. This is specific to the M Sport trim, but it feels really nice. Below that you've got some cheap plastics, but you don't really feel that it's really sunken in, and I mean, it's not really a problem. The seats, nice sporty seats. They hug you really well. Proper side bolstering, proper support around the thighs as well. The doors as well, really nicely done. More aluminum finishes on the speakers. Good materials used on the door pads, the door handles. It all feels really nice. You get into the BMW X1 and you feel like you've gotten into a luxury car. Now, everybody's moved the game on in this segment. The GLA, it has a really nice interior. The Q3, nice interior. But you know what? I think the X1 has the best interior of the lot. Okay, backseat of the BMW X1. I don't know how many people are actually going to use the backseat of the X1, but if you want to use it, you'll be mighty comfortable over here. Couple of reasons. One, good amount of space. Knee room is actually impressive. The wheelbase is slightly longer than the older X1 and it liberates a good amount of space. Headroom as well is really good. I didn't expect it to be so good, especially with this panoramic sunroof coming all the way back over my head. From the outside, the roofline, it looks a little aggressively sloped, but inside, there's plenty of room. Third reason, I can actually tuck my feet in all the way under the driver's seat, despite it being in its lowest position. So feet go in, I can stretch out, there's a good amount of leg room over here. Now coming to the seats themselves, good amount of support from the back. The bench itself is fairly flat, so you should be able to seat three side by side with the center person being reasonably comfortable, but you will have limited amount of shoulder rooms. These cars, these compact SUVs, they are narrow, and that is a compromise you're going to have to make in the back seat. You've got an armrest, power for the course with cup holders. You can flip it up all the way back. But something that's really cool over here is you pull on this loop and it opens a cavern into the boot. So I can reach into the boot and pull out stuff. Another thing to increase boot space is the fact that this bench actually moves forward and backwards. So it limits my knee room if I move it too much forward, but I can liberate more space in the boot. You've also got two AC vents over here. No separate climate control zone for the rear. You do get fan controls, that's about it. And you get two USB C-type ports along with a small shallow tray underneath it. The seats also have a recline function. So I have to get to this loop on the side over here and I pull it, the seat can come forward. This is its most upright setting, but I can push it all the way back and get more comfortable. So back seat of the X1, if you're looking for a luxury car to be driven around in, says this isn't actually too bad. Now before we get to the driving, one last thing, boot space. The BMW X1, it has hands-free boot opening, so very simple. If you've got bags in your hands, large deep boot inside, good amount of space. You can fit two bags in here easy. This is a large camera bag. Look how deep in it goes, and this is with the seats in its rearward position. You can slide them forward to make more space. You can flip them down to make more space. You've also got a space saver under the boot floor in case you get a puncture. No punctures today. I'm going to get to the driving. See you inside. Okay, first impressions of the BMW X1. Now, it feels grown up. And that's something I've actually said about every single car in this segment. When the GLA launched, it felt a lot more grown up than the previous one. When the Q3 launched, it felt a lot more grown up than the previous one. And the same holds true for this X1. It feels a lot more grown up. It feels more like an X3 than ever before. And that is a good thing, because these compact SUVs have always had the impression of being small hatchbacks on stilts. But slowly and surely, they're doing away with that with more matured driving dynamics and more matured ride and handling. Okay, now let's talk specs straight up. This is the 18D. So the BMW X1 18D S-Drive. 18D implies that it's a 2-liter diesel engine which makes 148 bhp and 360 Nm of torque. You can also get it with an 18i petrol engine. That is a 3-cylinder petrol. I haven't driven that car, but my impression is that this should be the pick of the lot if you want a little bit of performance. The engine is mated to a 7-speed DCT, and for India, the X1 is only front wheel drive. So its rivals, GLA, it has the option of 4MATIC. The Q3, it is with Quattro as standard. The X1 comes only with front wheel drive. Now, is that a problem? Not a problem per se, but today it's been a damp, drizzly day up here in the hills, and there have been times where traction control has kicked in. Sometimes setting off the line a little aggressively, sometimes getting out of a corner a little aggressively. The traction control has kicked in a little bit. In situations like that, all-wheel drive would have just ironed it out, put down the power better, more seamlessly, more effortlessly. But in day-to-day driving in the city, on the highway, you're not going to miss all-wheel drive that much. Maybe there's the argument you can make about SUVs need to have all-wheel drive. Probably, but how many people are going to take the X1s off-roading, really? If you take it down a light trail, this will do it. If you take it down a heavy trail, I mean, there again, the question lies, how many people are going to do that? But that aside, instead of questioning whether the X1 is an SUV or not, let's talk about performance, the diesel engine. I'd say performance is adequate. When you get on the gas, there's a good amount of shove. In your personal mode, where the engine isn't in its sportier setting, it's gentle when it picks up speed. It's not super aggressive. You can put it into sport. There's a Sport Plus setting for the engine within sport mode, and once you do all of that, the engine does feel really perky. The responses initially are very strong, and it does get a move on quickly. If you're wondering what the 0 to 100 speed is, it's 8.9 seconds. So it's not super quick, but it's brisk. Something that really stood out for me is the refinement of the engine. So at low speeds, at crawling speeds, when you're not asking too much of the engine, it actually crawls very quietly. You know, if you've got the AC on, you can't even hear the engine. I'm not saying the AC is very loud, but the engine is actually that quiet that it's completely drowned out by whatever the fans in the car. So refinement is top notch. When you ask a little bit more out of the engine, when you get it to rev out, then you do hear it. There is a little bit of that diesel gruff, but it's never intrusive, it's never a problem. It does feel like an engine that's fitting off the X1's credentials. Now, the engine itself is familiar, this 2-liter diesel engine. We've had it on sale in India before, but here it has revised internals. There are changes to the pistons, stuff like that, to make it a little more efficient than before. Interestingly, the X1 also gets a starter generator, which allows it to regen a little bit of charge during deceleration, and you can see that on the screen. When you brake, there is a meter that goes into the charging zone, much like it would on an EV. Now, BMW doesn't classify the X1 as a mild hybrid, but it does get a starter generator that does regen power. It's also worth talking about the DCT. So the DCT, it comes standard across the X1 range. Whether you choose the petrol, whether you choose the diesel, you're getting a 7-speed DCT. Now DCTs, they tend to be a little bit juddery at low speeds, but this BMW DCT is actually really good. Whether you're in city driving or you're belting it out on the highway or in the hills, it is very, very good. So in the city, there's no jerks at low speeds, coming to a halt, picking up at low speeds. It's very smooth, very refined. Or out here in the hills, shifts are quick. You have no complaints whatsoever. It feels like a sporty car. You have your My Modes button, put it into sport mode, and you're good to go. So sport mode does a number of things. One of them is tightening up the steering wheel, and it does it well, because in comfort mode, the steering wheel feels a little bit vague. Now BMWs, they have always had traditionally good steerings. So I was a little surprised, but the second you put it into sport mode, there's weight added to it. It feels a lot more dialed in, and you feel a lot more connected to the front end. It's not really adding feel, it's mostly adding weight, but that turn in off center feels a lot more direct. Before I talk about all of the drive modes, I think I should talk about the chassis and how it behaves as well. Now, handling, it's a good handler. It likes to change direction. It's enthusiastic. In sport mode, you've got that punchier throttle, you've got that heavier steering wheel, and the car feels dialed in. Body roll is surprisingly controlled. The chassis has been updated for this gen. So it's got a number of updates in terms of rigidity, in terms of strength of the chassis. It's also got updates to the steering geometry, and all of that makes this a really neat handling machine. Ride quality is good. There's a hint of firmness, a little bit of the road that you will feel inside of the car, but it feels so tight down. It feels so German. It feels like the kind of car that you want to go storming the highways on because of how planted and stable it feels. It does soak up bumps well, so when you've got smaller rounded bumps, you will feel a little bit in the cabin, but it soaks up the most of it. And honestly, I'm okay with the ride and handling balance that they've got here, because this is a nimble handler. And if that means compromising the ride a little bit for that, I'm all for it. There's another interesting thing on the X1 that I actually saw first on the i7, which is the boost function. Now, you pull in the left pedal for 1 second and you get 10 seconds of the X1 in its sportiest driving settings. So it doesn't actually change the peak outputs of the car in any way, but it'll make the engine in its sportiest format. It'll downshift to the lowest gear possible. So for 10 seconds, you have the sportiest possible car. Now, where I see a use case for it is if you're driving in comfort mode and you want to make a quick overtake, but you don't want to go dive into the menus and choose sport mode and all of that. Just tug on the pedals. 1 second, you've got sporty settings for 10 seconds, make your overtake, make your move, and you're good to go. Back to normal. Another thing the X1 has picked up from the i7 7 Series is the My Modes. Now, My Modes mean you do get regular driving modes. You have your personal mode, which you can customize. You've got Sport mode, which has the sportier driving settings, like I explained. You've got an Eco mode, which dulls down the throttle responses, keeps the gears in the highest possible gear to prioritize economy, and you've got a couple of other modes. So if I click the My Modes here, you've got Expressive, you've got Relax, and you've got Digital Art. Now, these three modes don't really do anything to the drivetrain or the chassis per se. What they do change is the ambiance inside the cabin. So it's daytime now, you won't be able to see it, but when I click Expressive, the ambient lighting in here changes. Same for Relax, same for Digital Art. The ambient lighting, it matches the mood of the car. The screens, they take up different visuals, and it's meant to make you feel a certain way inside the car. Highlights of the BMW X1, it's handling. In fact, it'll actually cock a wheel up if you push it really hard over some of the hairpins. The steering feels sharp, it feels dynamically sound, it likes to hold a line really well, and despite being two-wheel drive, it does put down the power, even on a slippery day like this. But I think most importantly, the BMW X1 does a good job of the luxury car experience. You need to remember, you're going to be spending 50 lakh rupees on this car. That's a lot of money. And it needs to make you feel like you've spent a lot of money. And the X1 actually does a great job of that. You know, the insides, they feel really expensive. It's got inspirations from the iX, which is a flagship now. So you've got these large, crisp displays. This floating console makes you feel like you're in a really special car. Everything that you touch and feel feels expensive. And in the back, you've got a back seat that you can actually use. So you won't feel shortchanged that you spent so much money, but you can't enjoy relaxing in the back seat. So the X1, it does a very good job of nailing that luxury car experience. Now, back to the original question that I asked you at the start. Should I pick this over a GLA and a Q3? Honestly, it's a really tight fight, and I hate to say this to you right now, but I think I'm gonna have to drive them back to back to give you a solid opinion on that. But from first impressions, I'm really impressed by the X1. I think if you're somebody who likes to drive a car hard, this is a nice car to have. It feels like a sporty car. The Q3 also is actually a great SUV to drive. It's got that lovely TSI engine. It's actually got really good dynamics and all-wheel drive standard, but this is a really nice car to drive as well. So like I said, I'm gonna have to make you wait for the comparison test to give you a verdict, but on first impressions, X1 is really hitting the spot. Now, before I get to the prices and how it stacks up against its rivals in terms of price, there's one more thing that I need to talk to you about, and that is ADAS. The X1, it does get ADAS. So you get basic stuff: forward collision warning, lane keep assist, front radars, front cameras. It's a basic ADAS system, but it exists. And so far, I haven't found it to be too intrusive. It was set to early intrusiveness earlier in the day, and there was only one moment when a bike came in front of me that it really braked hard. After that, I set it to late intrusiveness, and I've had no issues with the conditions that we're in. So yeah, there you have it. The BMW X1, a generational change. And honestly, it feels like a generational change. This is a big update on what the X1 used to be. I'm very impressed. Okay, the BMW X1 in terms of price cost rupees 50.9 lakhs ex-showroom. Compare that to the Audi Q3, the Mercedes-Benz GLA, and this actually comes across as the most expensive in its class because the Q3, it is 50.4 lakhs ex-showroom if I'm not wrong, and the GLA slots in under 50 lakhs if you're looking at the diesel with front-wheel drive. The diesel all-wheel drive is more expensive than the X1, but then that's not an apples-to-apples comparison. The X1, I think it makes a lot of sense because it nails the important bits about being a luxury car. You've got a car that feels special every time you get into it in terms of the materials, the quality of the interiors, the way it looks and feels, and it drives really well. It drives like a BMW. So if you are a driving enthusiast, this is certainly a car that should be on your shortlist. I know 50 lakhs sounds like a lot, but cars have gotten expensive. And everything in this segment now sits around the 50 lakh rupee mark. So looked at in that perspective, in the perspective of its rivals, this X1 is a worthy competitor to them. And it's certainly worth a look if you're in the market for an entry-level luxury SUV.